Juventus are the most dominant club in the history of Italy. And right now they're in shambles as the club finds itself embroiled in the midst of a financial scandal that the club hasn't seen the likes of for 17 years. For most clubs, that time frame would usually be a bit longer, but Juventus kind of feel this need to have a scandal every 20 years. It keeps the world of football on their toes. What's actually happened at the Bianconeri, and what are the repercussions of these actions across Serie A in Europe? Welcome back to the channel, and this is the Plusvalenza scandal explained. In short, Juventus have cooked the books, and the Italian government is coming down hard on some of the financial gymnastics of Juve's accountants. But at its simplest level, which if we're honest, that's all I can understand, they did two things, and the first is pretty simple. In March 2020, as a certain virus was on the rise and the Serie A season was temporarily suspended, the world was heading into its first lockdown. Without the continuation of the sporting season, the financial security of all football clubs across Europe was threatened, and Juventus's playing staff, well, they led the way. They agreed a vast salary reduction that saved the club approximately 90 million euros. The president of Italian Football Federation, Gabriele Gravina, praised the Juve response at the time, describing it as an example to the whole system and the first great response to the emergency that we are experiencing. As COVID shut down welfare, it was the Juventus example that set off a chain reaction across Italy and Europe, as players and managers took pay cuts to help the clubs and leagues they competed in stay alive. Or did they? The reality is the Juventus example that all of this was built on, I think it might have been built on a lie. According to Gazzetta dello Sport, the most renowned sports journalism page in the land, the reduced salary agreements were never actually reduced. The salaries were just delayed. Allegedly, Juventus back-channeled around 60 million euros to players, paying more or less the same wage they would have got, but just at a later date. Importantly though, without ever paying any tax on it. WhatsApp messages from club captain Giorgio Chiellini into the players' group chat are evidence that the players never actually agreed to such a reduction, but instead it was just this delay, and they were told to ignore this narrative of a reduction, and importantly, not to talk to the press about it. Allegedly, Juve paid 17 of the 25-man Serie A squad their full salaries through COVID, whilst avoiding tax, and falsified their financial statements to present a £90 million saving, which in reality was probably only around 22 million euros. Just a side note, could you imagine being those 8 players that didn't get the full payment? You'd be raging. So that's crime number 1. The second crime though, that's a little bit more complicated. It's called Plusvalenza. Consob, the Italian regulator for the stock exchange like the SEC in the US or the FCA here in Britain, began an investigation into the strange books of Juventus during the 1920 season, and they weren't too happy with their, amongst a number of other Italian clubs, capital gains on transfers. Now stick with me here because I've got to get into some financial jargon like amortization. Amortization is effectively how a player is valued as an asset on the club's balance sheet. Simply, it works like this. If I sign a player for 100 million on a 5-year deal, his value is what? 100 million, right? Well, yes and no. For the first year it is, but it's better described as worth 20 million for each of the seasons on his contract. In regard to his value, he's depreciating from the minute he really walks in the door. He's worth 100 million in year 1, 80 in year 2, 60, 40 and 20 until finally on his final year, he's technically worth nothing at all, like how he can walk out the door on a Bosman deal. Now, if over the 5-year period of their contract I choose to sell my magical footballer, things get a little bit trickier to understand. If after 3 years where his value to me is 40 million, I manage to sell him for, I don't know, let's say 60, this is not technically seen as a loss from the original 100 million, but a profit from the 40 million that I immediately got. A £20 million profit from his current £40 million value. A gain in money, a capital gain, or in Italian, plusvalenzas. The fee was greater than his value at that stage of his contract. You still with me? Yeah. Cool. Right. Back to Juventus. In Turin, the old lady orchestrated swap deals like Pjanic and Melo and Danilo and Cancelo. But instead of actually swapping the players, in exchange, they sold each player above their value at that point in their contract to manufacture this capital gain or plusvalenza, which could then be applied to its balance sheet and make the club look like it had actually lost less money than it actually was, which, as a publicly traded company, is very much illegal. By covering up losses through presenting capital gains in dodgy transfer deals, they presented a false understanding to investors about the value of their assets and what they had on the books of the club. At its simplest level, it's market manipulation. Now, I may have just finished Kaleidoscope, but I'm no criminal genius. But I would give you some advice if you're going to break the law and all. Don't keep a well-organised diary of exactly how you did it. Sounds simple, I know, but ex-Juventus head of football Fabio Paratici didn't exactly get the memo. The now Tottenham director of football's Black Book contained details of a number of smaller transfers Juve were involved in and openly wrote of the excessive use of capital gains. That last bit there's a quote. to aid the financial statements of the club. In reality, he more or less left a smoking gun in his own office when he's packed his bags and moved to North London. And now, with the evidence it reclaimed, the Italian government had all they needed to bring the hammer down on Juventus. And boy, did that hammer come down hard. Leading actors in the Juventus management got their comeuppance and, well, and then some. Chairman Agnelli, whose family have owned the club for over 100 years, and CEO Maurizio Arrivabene, former team principal of Ferrari by the way, have been banned from football for 2 years. Football director Freddie Cherubini has been banned for 16 months. Pavel Nedved, yes, that one who won the Ballon d'Or, and other directors have been banned for 8 months. But the big one of all, Fabio Paratici, has been banned from football for 2.5 years, which leaves his new club Tottenham, who hired him, counting on this Conte-Paratici relationship that took Juventus to titles in Italy, in a weird, director of football limbo. On the club side, things aren't really much better. Pending appeal, Juventus have been given a 15-point deduction in the league, dropping them to 10th and on the same amount of points as Empoli and Bologna, almost the same distance between the relegation zone and 4th place Lazio in the Champions League spots, all but certainly counting Juventus out of the Champions League for the 2023-2024 season. So, well, really that's where we are. It's awkward because Italian football has this weird way of keeping these bad actors that have been proven to, badly act in its orbit. Look at Silvio Berlusconi and AC Milan. He's now pulling the strings at Monza. The likelihood of these bans really being enforced and keeping these guys away isn't really that likely. 2 years or 5 years or however long it takes, they're going to be in Italian football for the foreseeable future. And to be honest, there's probably going to be scandals like this again. All right, thank you very much. That's all we've got for you today. At its simplest level, that is what's happening at Juventus right now. They're probably out of the Champions League for next season. What does that mean for their squad? Are we going to see big players leave? Freddie Chiesa, Locatelli. What's going to happen now? The Italian club is kind of in freefall, but I guess only time will tell. I just want to say thank you very much for watching. It personally means a massive amount to me. If you like, subscribe this video, and yeah, stick around moving forward. See you in a bit.